Testing, testing.
Testing. Do you need us to talk? What? Oh, it's working, okay. Great. Sorry for those of you listening at home. We have had some technical difficulties and hopefully the system is back up running. Thank you for being patient. We didn't do anything while we were down, so we've just re-begun the study session, and Manager Lewis is going to take us through his next section.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, Council, if it's okay with you, this list is ordered with what I consider the more kind of challenging conversations at first. I hope that the bottom two are areas that you recognize as direct results of your requests, as well as citizen engagement that we've had just in the brief time that I've been here. It's almost not fair to say these are city manager initiatives. I've certainly asked for them, but they are a direct result from the things that you've been asking for. First of all, with the homeless camp abatement, as you know, that was an expensive process last year, and we think that if by resourcing this better, we can stay on top of that. As we've talked about during the interview process for the city manager position, it's something that, you know, with resources, just small amounts of resources on an ongoing basis, you can prevent the need for those kind of large-scale cleanups. So if you have any questions about that, I'm glad to answer that. Dorothy Hargrove, Interim Deputy City Manager Dorothy Hargrove, has come to this dollar amount with the work that she's done on this over the last year. And so she can help answer those questions too. The second one is the seasonal code officer. This is not a full-time position. This would be a part-time position. It's something that I have found in other communities that has worked very well to supplement the kind of the seasonal nature of the highest period of code complaints and code enforcement activities, which is in that growing season. Because of those overgrowth restrictions that we have and the complaints that we've received, particularly in the alleys of our community, but really community-wide, we think that this is a great way to start chipping away at that, providing code officers with another resource on the street that's documenting, posting, and then the code officers who are trained and certified can actually work through the legal process, but do that much quicker if they're not having to both do the out in the field work plus the kind of the behind the scenes legal actions. So that totals about $30,000. And again, that's for, I believe, a 6-month period, comparable to what we have now. That would not be a benefited position. So moving on to the more maybe harder to explain items, starting with the top one, placemaking and wayfinding. So really the problem statement that as I've talked to people both in the community, neighborhoods, particularly commercial areas in some of my meetings, some of which have been people that you all have suggested that I meet with, that have been very enlightening. Certainly, you know, staff has some of these same perceptions, but really the problem statement is that residents and visitors to the community really don't necessarily know when they're leaving or entering Englewood. We have some kind of more CDOT type signage that are on a number of our entrances. Why is that important? First of all, when you think about instilling community pride into people, a lot of times pride is just knowing that you're in a place. There is a place you've entered. You are here. And that sense of community pride that, okay, now we're in Englewood and this is a place that I'm proud to be. And that signage, that placemaking, things like the grass that are in the median as you come into the downtown area on Broadway are a great example, an excellent example of placemaking. And wayfinding is kind of the same thing, but it's actually words, it's signage, it would say entering Englewood. Those types of things, again, create that sense of place, that sense of identity. And the reason that is important is because when you have lower pride in the community, you tend to have more criminal activity, you have less property maintenance, you have lower property values. It's kind of a cascading effect when community pride goes down. So so what we're really looking at is how can we increase community pride, and placemaking can be a big part of that, as can wayfinding. Another example is commercial districts, which I've consistently heard from folks at the chamber, from folks in the ACE committee, that we don't have defined commercial districts. So how can we use signage and placemaking to help create that? One of the suggestions that was thrown out was, some sort of lighting system above Broadway. That's placemaking. That's not just a, decoration. It's a way to identify you are here and you have entered into somewhere special that we think is of high importance. And we can do that with a number of ways, street banners and things that are less expensive maybe than that, but that could help really our commercial districts create that sense of place. So another thing that we have a lack of is the ability to really know where our community amenities are. Pirates Cove is something that a lot of people from all over the region come to. Do we have good signage that really kind of leads them? It's called breadcrumbs is the technical, or I don't know if it's a technical term, but what sign makers use to say to get people to where you want them to go is using this kind of breadcrumb approach where you're putting signs along your right-of-way that get people to where they want to go. It's also an advertisement, and so and you're connoting messages about your community with colors and fonts and imagery that can really help build your brand and reinforce the brand, which again goes back to that kind of community pride. So again, it's really just a missed opportunity. Not having those things really very strongly here is just a missed opportunity for really building that brand and that sense of identity. Any questions about those? And then I'll get into the neighborhood
Councilmember
items.
Martinez.
Thank you. I am all for that, and we've talked about it quite a bit over the last couple of years. I know Cultural Arts Commission has spent a good amount of time talking about it. With the $50,000, do you think that would get us part of the way there? Maybe just like the first year it would be, $50,000, and then continue to build on that? Because obviously $50,000 wouldn't probably do everything we would dream of, right?
Right, thank you for that question, and I'm not addressing a big important part is what is the money for? First of all, I should tell you that we do have about $150,000 in a capital budget that has not been spent from a couple of years ago, where there was kind of an idea that we should do this, but it was never kind of implemented. We have done spent some money out of that original, I think $250,000 for signage at some of the city facilities, but there is about $150,000 left. So we have some money to implement. What we don't have is a design manual that we come in and we say, this is where the signs need to go, this is what they look like, here is the community engagement process where we are pulling communities together, the community together, and neighborhoods together, and commercial districts together to really say, okay, what do you think the identity is of this area, and how can we turn that into placemaking or signage that really represents what you think about the community. The hardest is the gateways into the community, because you really have to engage the entire community in, what do you think we are as a community? Do you want a classy looking sign? Do you want a fun looking sign? There are all sorts of ways that you can go with that. So that's a very difficult process, and the $50,000 would get us a great plan that had, significant community engagement that would really help us answer that question.
Awesome, thank you.
Councilmember Berentine.
When we talked about this before, basically what it was about downtown, about we had, I think, some realtors that were going to give us some money, pay for one sign, and then maybe bring that along Broadway. And the businesses didn't want it. They didn't want any more junk on the sidewalk. They didn't want any more stuff blocking their signs or taking up their ability to do a patio or the flow for it. I mean, part of what I think like Englewood Grand wanted was just the Hollywood lights across the street, like what they do down in Lodo. However, I'm getting a little bit different idea from what you're saying, and that's more like what Greenwood Village does at the beginning of theirs. I was talking to somebody on Clarkson, and Greenwood Village, they've got that little entrance piece to it. It looks like a residential area. It looks like a community, and they just thought, well, if we can't slow people down on Clarkson, maybe we can at least make it look like they're coming into a community. And I would like to see what you're talking about. If there's going to be differences where we're talking about the industrial area or commercial area, retail area or neighborhoods, similar to what Arapahoe Acres does, where you've got some identity in that particular neighborhood. And each of the neighborhoods already have names. I mean, we already have some identity going on. So it sounds like you're wanting to go ahead and make sure to include that community in or that area in to see what their ideas would be for that kind of what placemaking and wayfinding would be. Like doing Pirates Cove sign on Bellevue somewhere to say Englewood, you know, this way or whatever, similar to that. But that's way different than what we talked about for wayfinding before. I mean, because we didn't want to get trapped into the Littleton where they've got a historic wayfinding sign, they got a Hollywood wayfinding sign, they've spent $1.6 million on wayfinding signs, and everybody in this very concentrated area, and they just go, it was a waste of money, and that's just dumb. You have competing signs and the School for the Blind down the street where they're like, why would we have done this? So we originally, I thought it was going to be similar to that. So if it's going to be different, I would be much more supportive of the way that you're bringing this up to go forward. And I know you don't have all of the ideas set out yet, but I at least am very supportive of the foundation that you've kind of set out about this, so thank you.
Councilmember, I don't know if it was Wink or Cuesta, to be honest.
Thank you, Cuesta. Thanks, Mayor. I wholeheartedly support everything you've introduced here this evening. Manager Lewis. I love the idea of the breadcrumbs in terms of leading visitors and residents, any human body in our community to the special areas. There's Pirates Cove, there's the Gothic Theater, there might be a certain church, there might be, I mean, there are lots of hidden gems. Some are obvious, but there are hidden gems here. And so I think it is important to incorporate some sort of signage to not just celebrate the unique nature of Englewood, of little small town Englewood right next to Denver, but Englewood that has grown and evolved into where we are today. I also love the idea of, and before I say that, I see that your next bullet point is talking about neighborhood identification, so I won't go into that and tell you what I think about that. But I do also love the idea of placemaking represented through, for example, those lights highlighting a downtown district. I've been to a couple of sessions in the 2 CML conferences I've attended that highlighted the development practices, best practice in developing downtowns. I've read some books on the topic, you know, The Great Good Place by Ray Oldenburg. I mean, just wonderful thoughts and history and insights into how you really develop a thriving downtown. And I do think that that is one key area. I've seen it in many, many cities across the United States. It's not just Larimer Square, and it is a beautiful way based on what's happening in our little 3400 block, for example. So I think these examples, wayfinding, placemaking, they're progressive, they're current, they're for now, they're for the upcoming future, and so thank you for presenting that, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say next.
Councilmember Cuesta.
For the homeless abatement, $30,000 directed to that, and I got the impression then that is specifically geared towards the Platte River.
I'm going to ask Interim Deputy City Manager Dorothy Hargrove to come up and address that.
Thank you for asking. No, that is for continual abatement of smaller camps that could be on the Platte River, or they could be in a hidden pocket at Bellevue Park, which we've seen recently. So any place that people are setting up a camping situation that's inappropriate, we'd ask for professional services to come help clean them up to ensure health and safety and prompt response.
Thank you. So citywide enforcement is
Absolutely.
what that's dedicated to. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Sierra.
I guess I'll ask about the seasonal code officer. Have we identified how we're going to use that additional officer, if approved?
So upon being hired, so we post a position, hire the position in, and then they would be specifically my vision for it would be that they would be specifically targeting overgrowth violations. So that's grass, weeds, maybe it's, trees, voluntary trees that come up and that sort of thing in the alleys. In talking to Code Manager Lewis, he, sees the value in, looking into something like this. He initially had some concerns, well, they're not certified, but he's now, thinking through the fact that they can do a lot of the in-field work and documentation and posting violations that again frees up officers to do kind of their normal duties in the new 4 districts that are being created. Does that answer your question?
It does answer the question. Thank you.
Councilmember Barentine?
I do have a question about doing a seasonal code officer on the heels of just hiring another officer, and that we haven't really truly vetted how best we're doing moving those 4 districts. So we had huge concerns about the way that code enforcement is going. We hire another officer, and we haven't even, they've barely got their uniform on, and to go ahead and talk about this at this point without truly having some kind of evaluative process of how we're using this and putting this together, I think might be a little premature.
Councilmember Martinez?
Thank you. Since we're on the seasonal code enforcement officer, I guess we're kind of skipping around a little bit, but I'm in favor of it. I think it makes a lot of sense to do a part-time. And when we know that is our growing season, that we have a lot of issues with that, I think a seasonal part-time position makes a whole lot of sense. And especially because I think it's a good way to alleviate the concerns of us saying all the time, we're not proactive enough, we're only reactive. I think this is a good solution for that particular need that we see a lot of in the summertime. And I think it's a really smart way to go about that. So I'm supportive.
Councilmember Wing?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also fully supportive of the seasonal code officer. We heard last meeting from Code Enforcement Supervisor Lewis, who made very clear the imbalance between the human resources on in that division and the number of calls, the volume of work. And so, yes, adding another human being it was more than overdue and will support them being more proactive and moving forward. And I think it only supports the argument for an unbenefited part-time individual in for these grass and weed seasons, just to manage that percentage of the workload so that these full-time perhaps more technically trained individuals to tend to everything that, well, yeah, the rest. I think it's necessary, it's been warranted, it's been explained, it's been supported in all of the numbers and documentation explanation we've had most recently last week.
Mayor Pro Tem Russell?
Thank you. I do kind of have a logistical question because the new code enforcement officer that we just brought on, it took 2 or 3 months to train him before he could ever go out. So what is the turnaround time? We hire part-time seasonal employees. They still are going to have to be trained, and it's going to take staff time to train them. And so is the payback worth it? And I do happen to agree with Councilmember Barentine that we don't have a baseline established yet because we're just changing over right now. Thank you.
Would you like to answer any of that?
Sure, Mayor and council members, thank you for those comments. And those are great comments. I mean, the fact that, we are just now kind of having a newly trained and ready to go out into the field code officer start. We will have about 3 months, obviously, for them to kind of get in a pattern of their new district. What I saw when I came into the community is, number one, so much consternation, and I think we can all agree, within the community about code enforcement. And I'll tell you, that's not normal. Most cities do not have a lot of drama or concern around code enforcement. I've never been in a city that did. And the second thing that I notice is that because we have the very unique situation of having code officers also be animal control officers, that in my opinion, and while the numbers don't hold it out, because we have more code cases than we do animal control cases, the animal control cases are far more complex in most cases than the code cases. Obviously, there are exceptions to that. But I would argue, and Mr. Lewis, Code Manager Lewis, doesn't agree with me on exactly, that we really only have 2 code officers and we have 2 animal control officers. His numbers are a little bit different. But as I look at it and knowing what I know about how code works and how animal control works, that combined system really limits severely what we in most communities call code enforcement. Because they're having to do those other functions. Does it make sense to have them combined? Absolutely. I mean, it's actually pretty efficient. I think more cities should look at it. But we shouldn't say we have 4 code officers. We simply don't. You know, we have what he would say, I think is 2.5 code officers and then the rest in animal control. So, yeah, so to me, we're a city of a certain age and of a certain development pattern that we no longer can afford to only have even 2.5 code officers. When a community is aging like we are, and it's just a cycle of how all cities go, you have to increase code enforcement or you're going to start seeing your property values decline, you're gonna see more properties falling into disrepair, which again creates that vicious cycle, downward spiral. And so to me, I think it's critical to increase the manpower of that function, even though we already have increased by 1, because we were, in my opinion, already too low.
Councilmember, yeah, Wink. No, oh, you're done? Okay. No, it's fine. I actually would love to, I think it might be good to pilot it this year and see what happens. And we have a baseline from last year. We know what the complaints are. I mean, that's what I'd like to see happen. And but I would like to have us have an assessed beginning point and end point and see what happens with it. It is definitely problematic. Alleys, I think, contribute to it too, in the way we have not maintained alleys the way that they maybe had been before, and the 2 exacerbate each other. And I think there was some point when the city used to trim trees in the alleys and do things, and some maybe perhaps it wasn't communicated properly, so people were expecting people to be taking care of some things that weren't taken care of, and a lot of educational things that are not the same as they used to be. So I think it might help us, even if it's for 1 season, to get ahead of it all. So I'm fine with it.
Do you
Want to
wrap
go
it up?
on to the other?
I'm sorry that I'm going long. I know these are more complex issues. So the last one, the next 2, the second and third bullet on the slide refer to some neighborhood services that I think that could really benefit us. So again, starting with the problem statements of what are we trying to solve and resolve, there is this sense that Englewood, even though we are an urban community, we are a first-ring suburb, that we are losing that sense of kind of small town feel. And I'm not talking about small town level of services or small town quality of life. I'm talking about neighbors knowing neighbors. How are we interacting and how are we really encouraging neighborhoods to be connected? How are we encouraging the public to get involved with their local government and civic organizations, beyond that? And so, I would also say that neighborhood identity, I appreciate Councilmember Barrentine's comment that, we do have names. I talk to many residents who don't have a name for their neighborhood. I have one of the more defined, I think, neighborhood, and we have signage and things like that, and there's kind of a group, an email list and that sort of thing. That does not exist citywide, and I think that actually creates a more disconnected, a less cohesive community, and that, again, translates into a community that is not engaged in the public policy making process. It's not engaged with helping neighbors. I have been talking to a resident who often comes to council about the need for kind of a volunteer system where, when you have an elderly neighbor who can't, take care of their sidewalks, In many cases, in fact, right across the street from me, there's a woman who their neighbors are helping take care of that spot. But I think that that's a result of our neighborhood being really cohesive. And so I think that when we look at some of the issues that we have with crime, that we have with code enforcement, those could be resolved in part. It's not a panacea by any means, but it's a way for for neighbors to help neighbors that are elderly, that are disabled, that are in need, that we can kind of pitch in. But until we have that people knowing one another and a more cohesive kind of neighborhood feel, I think that we continue to miss opportunities to do that. We also, again, and research shows that actually when people are more connected to their neighborhood, they also have more pride in their community overall. So again, it goes back to that pride, and how do we as a community, as a city, have a role in helping people connect? One of the emails that I got from a resident today, which I very much appreciated, was talking about, maybe with budget constraints, this isn't the best use of resources. Certainly we have to take a look at that. But what I would argue is that other cities are far ahead of Englewood in terms of having neighborhood resources where there's at least one person on staff that's really helping empower neighborhoods to, number one, get to know each other. Maybe that's in the form of additional, national night out groups, but events throughout the year where they can kind of get together. There was a recent post on social media, why don't we have parades? A lot of times parades start as a neighborhood kind of idea, and events in the community start as a neighborhood idea, and they kind of grow. And so again, I think if we want to encourage that sense of neighborliness, that sense of, the community having more of a cohesive feel, I think we have to put some resources, or should put some resources towards this. And so the proposed resource that we're talking about is one staff member. So you see the resource coordinator that I mentioned there. That's a fully benefited position. And again, this could also be a term. I like the idea of the pilot project for the seasonal code officer. This also could be a term employee. I would say we would at least need a 2-year kind of term. In my last city, we actually did the same thing with an additional community resource specialist and made it a term position, so that's something we could do here. The additional dollars, the $50,000, would be, number one, in order to even just identify the neighborhoods and get a sense of who the neighborhoods are, we will be using some of the work Historic Preservation Commission is doing to use subdivision names as potential way to kind of create a neighborhood identity. Schools, parks are another source, but just getting that information and interviewing residents about where do you think you live and where do you want to live in terms of a neighborhood identity. We really need probably some assistance, staffing assistance, just in the first year to actually do that, because it's a lot of boots on the ground. It's a lot of collecting emails from different people, contact information, and that sort of thing. And that would also pay for some training and things like that, certainly. I do want to point out that in terms of resources, this would be close to revenue neutral, because what was mentioned in the presentation that Director Sobota mentioned was that we are finishing up some reorganization in one of the departments that was started a few years back, and we have identified a position that we think could transfer into this. They will be given the opportunity to apply for this position, but as some of the cost savings that we expect to receive in 2020, we think we could actually bring on a new person and be more or less revenue neutral. So I do want to point out that. The outreach would be surveys, events, door-to-door, school outreach, outreach at the schools, because people with kids a lot of times have a strong connection to a neighborhood because of the neighborhood school, but others don't. So how can we kind of beef that up? In the first year, it would be developing a plan for how we're going to research best practices, interview stakeholders, and then hopefully within the first year, at the end of the first year, we'll be implementing some of the components of that plan. So what are the desired outcomes of that? Residents know what neighborhood they live in, and we can benchmark that by surveys. Residents have a sense of connection to their neighborhood, again, which then creates more community pride, neighborhood pride, all the benefits that come along with that. Increased neighbor-to-neighbor assistance, increased number of neighborhood-based events like national night outs, block parties, holiday decorating competitions, things like that. Increased resident participation in citywide events, so you can just look at overall numbers. And by the way, if you're not getting this, these are the metrics that we would use to evaluate success. How many people participate, new people participate in public policy discussions, resident ownership and the concerns of their neighborhood, so neighborhood watches, neighborhood cleanups, beautification projects. And then just city resource preservation. Again, could we see a reduced number of code violations as a result of this, reduced crime, property value retention, improved public policy through increased resident participation. So those would be some of the ways that we would benchmark success if we move forward with this.
All right, I think Mayor Pro Tem was up first.
So what department would this fall in?
That's a great question, Mayor Pro Tem Russell. I was just talking to Interim Deputy City Manager Hargrove today, and we think that it would be appropriate for this to start out in the City Manager's office, but I can see that, after a couple of years, if we want to continue that it would move probably into community development as a program or service from that department. But we really think that this would be, an important focus and something that the Deputy City Manager, or the full-time Deputy City Manager, would really want to have a lot of oversight in the first year.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Wink.
Thanks, Mayor. I really love these ideas that all support the building of the social capital and other forms of capital around our community. And I think what I love the most about this idea is the augmented security factor. It's a positive way for neighbors to engage in facilitated communication among a group that now knows they are a group. I say positive because certain online forums can get a little skewed in terms of, baseline positive thought and progress in terms of problem solving. But I love this idea, and I love it that you're considering schools, the locations and history of schools, just general history, the parks, the development of Englewood. And it is great that Member Barentine mentioned what she mentioned. So yeah, some of us already know about some of the identification pieces around town, but it'll be great to collaborate and consolidate all of that knowledge into these neighborhoods. And also, what would go well with it, maybe it's assumed, is the wayfinding and placemaking, of course, as occurs currently in Arapahoe Acres. It's so lovely. So thank you for this work.
Next is Member Martinez.
Thank you for these suggestions. I also love these suggestions. It encompasses a lot of what we've talked about over the last couple years in terms of what people love about our community, and it's like really embracing the things that people love, but also taking a proactive approach and making sure we make those things bigger and bolder and more secure and more formalized in our community, because it doesn't just happen on its own. You have to be intentional with them to keep those things intact. So I love that, and it brings together all the things, neighbors meeting neighbors, which is so important in terms of everything else, safety, security, beautification, all of those things. So I love this and look forward to seeing what this flourishes.
Any other comments? I like all these ideas. It looks to me like the first three are to contribute to some sense of pride and sense of community placemaking. So the first three, and then the next two, the last two, really have to do with preparing sort of the way for those things, because you can't, if you have white weeds and people are mad at each other, it's pretty hard to to really like your neighbor and go to a party or whatever, or the city. And then the homeless camp abatement also is another sort of paving the way for then a higher level of engagement. So I can see these all fitting. I do have a question about mediation. I've wondered over the years about what our opportunities are for when we do have really serious neighbor-to-neighbor sorts of anger, and if there's a possibility for some more mediation in one of these roles, but maybe that's not right for the resource coordinator, but I also think there are times where we need to call on someone to help people just kind of work it out, or offer it anyway. Mm-hmm. So I don't know where that would fall. So I don't know if you got enough, did you put yours back on and I didn't hear it? Okay, sorry, I just want to make sure. Do you have enough to go on with these? I didn't hear huge outrage against any questions to maybe flesh them out a bit. If it is net neutral, you think? So otherwise I'd go back to the HR 200,000, or I want to see more alleys done myself because I really think it would make a difference for people. It's another sort of paving the way on priorities in my mind, but I haven't heard anyone else chime in on that. But Member Cuesta.
Glad that you mentioned the Historic Preservation Society, because they're doing some work now on identifying these neighborhoods and getting that information out there. So I think that they might be a good resource as well. I would be willing to roll the dice on the audio video system next door. If we can, I think you said we're getting 20% of the alleys now. If we put another 200,000 towards it, which could be that 200,000 from next door to upgrade audio video, that gets us to maybe 50. Even if we got it 50%, even if we got it to 40%, if we could double that, I'd rather improve alleys than, I guess I'd rather take the risk on that and improve a few more alleys, would be my thought on it. Thank you.
Councilmember Martinez.
I would concur with that. I brought it up at the last time we talked about it. I think we can hold off on the audiovisual in the council chambers. I think alley improvements impact more of the community than recording our council meetings do. We still have action minutes. People can still come if they want to. I think the alleys would be a bigger priority for the majority of our citizens, and I've been talking about the importance of alley beautification for some time now. I think it really it would really improve the quality of life for a lot more folks in our community than recording a council meeting.
So I just want to make sure that this would not preclude that we wouldn't be not council recording council meetings. What we're talking about in there is an upgrade to a system. It's not going to change what happened tonight, I don't think. At least that's what I've been told. So if that's incorrect, then and we need to do that in order for tonight not to happen, then let's talk about that. But I've gotten the impression that no, that's not what that's about.
Your understanding is correct.
Okay, great.
I just want to make a clarification. I wasn't suggesting we stop recording the council
No.
meetings. I was just saying if that system fails and it goes down, it would not be the end of the world.
It's not that system that, well, yeah, I guess so. You're right. Yeah. Good. And yes, I knew someone had brought up alleys, but I couldn't remember who. It was you at that meeting. I was on the phone, so I wasn't always clear about who.
Well, the alley is beautification. I've been talking about
I know,
for a
you've
long
been
time.
talking
I've
for
never
years.
been able to really get it off the ground, even before I was on council.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Berenstain and then Sierra.
I just want to have that clarification more, and I'm not sure that Councilmember Martinez is meaning it the way that it's coming across. It would be the end of the world to not have it recorded, because people, that's a priority. That's a legal priority that we have to make sure that people are informed and have a record of the meetings. And since we've gone to that, away from verbatim minutes and to that is extremely important, because that's the working of their government and how they get information. But you did clarify it in that we're not talking about not recording it, and we would certainly take other steps to go ahead and make sure that a recording was happening. We'd just do it in another room, or we wouldn't not do our obligation, because that is extremely important, and it's the documentation that we have. So I just want to make sure that we're not even considering doing one over the other. It's just, okay, yeah, because it would be.
Councilmember Sierra.
I think Member Martinez did clarify her point. So I too would want to focus on the alleys. Obviously, we can't have a repeat of what happened last winter. So if we do have the ability to improve more of the alleys in the next budget cycle, then I'm definitely for that as well.
Councilmember Wink.
I'll be quick. Thank you, Member Martinez, for your thoughts and your clarification. And Mr. Cuesta, I think this is a fantastic way to solve problems and move forward. And so I'm behind what he suggested as well. I think it's a great compromise in managing the alley situation and still leaving us the ability to look at these or to move forward with these new recommendations and hit on one of our big pain points.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I am about taking care of the alleys, but also the suggestion that I heard the city manager say was that we can put it off for a while, but if it goes down, we still would have to fix it. Is that correct? So what are we going to do? How are we going to provide for that contingency if we spend the money in the alleys?
Go ahead if you want to answer.
Mayor Pro Tem, that's a great question. So that would probably come either from the contingency fund, which we have put some more money into as part of this presentation compared to the contingency we already were planning for. We've put another $100,000 into contingency. We could also, if it was really more expensive than what we're estimating, we could also, of course, use unassigned fund balance for that.
Which I think is a great use of unassigned fund balance. Your light is on again. Do you want to? No more? Okay. Great. You got enough direction? Super. Anything else? Finish this out.
So to finish this up, I just wanted to make sure that everybody is aware these costs are included in the balanced budget.
Yes.
I think that you knew that, but I just want to make sure that you know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good reminder.
It's a lot of information.
Yeah, it's great though. You've done a great job presenting it.
So can we move forward? We have a few more items?
we do.
Okay. So I wanted to make sure that we included a list of the items that were actually funded in our list. Or in our balanced budget. We originally met on May 11th, and we talked a lot about the department priorities. And so in the next several slides, it outlines what items were removed, the items that we talked about earlier, or were reduced from the original budget request. And I have outlined in red, this is actually, if we go back to our August 5th discussion, we included this list in the deck as well. And we had talked about it earlier in May. This just actually shows what is actually included, or what has been reduced, or what has been removed. And this is where you can see actually the positions that are being requested that are still in and are part of the budget. So I don't know that we need to go through each one. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that this existed so that you can see that. All right, so with that, we can conclude this part of the conversation. Our budget is balanced, but we do continue to face challenges. A couple of these I've mentioned. We've talked that we do lack revenue diversity, and we do, because we are so dependent on sales and use tax, that we do require a strong retail support in Englewood in order to support our budget. Again, the proposed 7% sewer utility rate, this isn't general fund related, but I wanted to make sure that we kept in mind that that was the only proposed rate and fee, and it won't support ongoing capital maintenance and operations needs. Our healthcare premiums, this is something that I mentioned. The negotiated discussions, or the discussions that we're having with the vendors, do include caps for 2021 and 2022. However, there are additional increases included in those caps. Also, we have the challenge of our community, right, and their expectations regarding the levels of service, and we need to make sure that we balance that with our existing resources and available funding. So that concludes our presentation for tonight. Again, I've talked about the dates moving forward, but I also did want to let you know that the budget book is now online at englewoodco.gov, which I'm very excited about, in the Spotlight section. And the revenue manual and the South Platte budget book are also included. And then the line item budget was updated on OpenGov that reflects what we've presented tonight. It was uploaded on Friday as well to OpenGov. So you do have those resources. We do have paper copies of the revenue manual in South Platte, and we have 4 copies of the budget book as well. So with that, I'll leave it up to more questions and conclusion.
Congratulations on getting it posted before midnight. Mayor Pro Tem had her light on.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And I'm really thankful for the staff and the hard work that they've done to balance the budget, because I feel like since I've been on council, this is the first time there's been a balanced budget. We were always using the beginning fund balance in order to balance the budget, and I feel like this is legitimate. I do have a concern. We are, in our budget, we are including full-time employees at the managerial level. And the concern that I have is in 2014, Public Works laid off 12.3 employees, I believe, mostly by attrition, whether they retired or whether they moved on. And a lot of those were worker bees. And I believe that part of the reason that Director DeAndrea has said that the reason we've left things undone is because we don't have the employees to accomplish it. And so I'm concerned that we're loading top-heavy employees and not the worker bee employees that we would need, especially in the Public Works Department. That is one thing. The other thing that the proposed 7% sewer utility rate increase, I really would like for this council to start looking at increasing tap fees and other things to generate revenue rather than to continually go. And I mean, this could be part of the rate study, but I think it's something that perhaps council needs to talk about before we begin raising fees. And I know that we are very heavily dependent on sales tax, but most home rule municipalities are. I've kind of noticed that in the 4 years I've been on council, the amount of sales tax has dropped significantly. I think it was closer to 69% before. And so I don't know if that's because we're losing businesses or what's going on. But as far as the sales tax and being heavily dependent on it, I believe that another thing that we need to do as a council and as a city is to become more business friendly and generate more clientele that will help bolster the sales tax revenue. So I think those are just things I would like to consider. But I am very thankful that we are presenting, or you have presented, a balanced budget. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? I'd like to piggyback on the question Mayor Pro Tem Russell raised, and that's about retail and generating sales tax. There was a study, I believe, that Manager Keck did at some point saying that we were over-retailed. And if that is in our document still, I think it might have been 3 years ago or so, maybe 4, that actually we needed more rooftops to support the number of retail that we have. And I don't know who did that and what the management of it was, but and perhaps there's different perspectives on it, but I would like to know if that's still true, if it's not, where we headed with it. It seems to me like there's different kinds of retail that generates differently kinds of, services, massage places, or this kind of, something that doesn't get taxed certainly offsets some of those things. So, Councilmember Martinez, and then Councilmember Sierra.
Thank you. I also want to thank staff for all the hard work. I know so much work goes into this, and thanks for providing it all. And I really liked the chart we have of what we're keeping in and what we're not. I think that's a good reminder of all the discussions that have taken place. And also just want to really reiterate that I really appreciate the proactive steps that we're taking with the new positions and the new programs to really look forward into the future with the asset management and the several employees that we're adding. I think it's really going to set us up for a better future. So thank you.
Councilmember Sierra.
Just a clarification or just correction. I'm not sure, because I know Mayor Pro Tem was using percentages in terms of sales tax, but the sales tax dollars have actually been increasing, the sales and use tax dollars. It was 24.8 million in 2014. At the end of 2018, it was 28.9 million, so just under 29 million. But I know you were using percentages, so I guess percentages in terms of the general fund, maybe that's what you meant, but I know that sales taxes are actually going up. I do want to thank staff as well in terms of all the work that they did on the budget. It was, to me, in terms of just understanding, maybe it's because it's my second year going through the budget cycle, but just understanding where it was going and what the expenses were going towards. I thought it was just the discussions throughout the entire year have been great. So, and in terms of a hard copy, I would prefer a hard copy. I'm not sure. I can wait till tomorrow if need be, but if no one's going to take one tonight, I'll definitely take it.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
I do appreciate Councilmember Sierra's point, because when you're working with that percentage, actually what it's showing is we are less dependent on sales tax, because the sales tax is going up. It's just a smaller percentage of the whole. So we're already accomplishing some of that in some ways. And I would like one of the books. Probably not a big surprise that I would want a hard copy, but.
Let's keep going around for that question. Councilmember Martinez, do you want a hard copy?
I do not need one tonight, thank you.
But will you want one before we get to the budget night, the hearing night?
No.
Okay, Councilmember Wink.
I don't need one before, yep, no.
But would you like one at all, is what?
Yes,
I mean,
at all.
at the end, we'll do the final one, but do you want the preliminary
Proposed.
one or not? We always have had it,
No,
just so you know.
no.
Okay, Councilmember Questa.
you.
I'm okay for proposed electronically, but certainly paper once we get to final. Thank you.
Okay,
Great.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I would like a paper copy, please.
All right, I think we've got enough to go around for tonight then.
And you'd like
Yeah.
one as well?
I think I want one because people refer back to pages so much, and
Great.
yeah, it's hard to be up there leading and doing it and moving this, so.
Can I make
Yeah,
one more
go
comment?
ahead.
So next week, we have the public hearing, and we have had some questions that were asked. What I'd like to propose is that I include responses to those questions in the council communication, so we're very clear. Is
That would
good?
be great, because then that can be part of it, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Great, thank you so much. We move on to council members' choice. Who would like to kick us off? All right, I'll start. All right, Councilmember Sierra.
I guess I'll start off. My first two are actually council requests for the city or Madam Attorney. So actually, I would like to get some alternative language. I know this has been brought up by Chair Bowden, and apologies for just misremembering your name, but Chair Bowden, in terms of the governing legislation for CEAC, after last week's presentation from Supervisor Lewis, he did mention some aspects that fall under the purview of code enforcement that potentially is not included within the wording of, I don't have the legislation in front of me, I think it's .3A, something along those lines, but it listed out all the different chapters within Title 15, but obviously there are other titles that are affected or that code enforcement enforces that are not under that title. So I know that last week during the conversation that we had with Officer Lewis and code enforcement, he listed out specific items. So if we could just get some clarity in terms of the wording that may potentially that we can use in order for CEAC is to be the most effective, I would like that.
Can you turn this on? Thank you.
Do you want that to go in, do you want that to go into the packet?
Do we know when it's going to be coming? Well, it should go into the packet, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then secondly, I think all of council received an email this morning, and I know I received a second one, but there was a citizens that basically wanted us to get involved with situations that are currently going through the municipal court system. I don't feel comfortable answering them. I know that we're not supposed to get involved once it starts going through the process. So if there's any way that you can recommend some type of language or some type of email to say, yes, we did receive it, but we're not, it's got to go through the whole due process aspect of it. So if we could get some wording that we could reply back that doesn't put us into any kind of legal bind, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Is that all?
No, there's still more.
Okay,
And
keep
then
going. Keep going.
I'm not done yet. No, but I want to thank
Councilmember Barrington, I'll let you follow up with the same thing. That's fine.
So, and then I just want to thank everybody that came out for Be a Tool this past Saturday, and everybody involved. I know, Mary, you said a few words at the beginning. City Manager Lewis, we saw you there as well. But just Tony Arnaldi, the entire staff, everyone that put something together. I got to meet some new neighbors, and it's just a great event. Just seeing everybody involved. There were kids at our site. They were playing around, looking for snakes, finding snake skins. The entire process was actually pretty cool. So I was out there a good 8 hours. I think we went till past 5 o'clock that day. So we were there pretty late, but it was still a good time. Everybody was great within the team. So I just had a fun time. This is my second year doing it. So yeah, just another great community building event. And actually, I'll mention the last one. So lastly, I'm going to be going to the ETAC meeting this Thursday. And there's actually something pretty important to me that's going to be on the agenda, and that's the Idaho Stop Rule. As many of you know, I'm a cyclist, and I've always felt that we needed to do more in order to improve the safety of cyclists and any type of pedestrian within the city. Obviously, we had a death here in Englewood to a cyclist off of Downing and Dartmouth, or just north of Dartmouth last year. And unfortunately, I had a friend that actually was hit by a car last week. She's fine, but it was a hit and run situation. Mayor, we talked, you experienced something similar with the student. So I'm just looking for ways to improve the safety of the citizens here in Englewood, and I feel that based on the metrics that are available, the Idaho stop would allow that. But they're going to be discussing it. I'm going to be there and giving my 2 cents on it. And so just wanted to make everybody aware that that's going to be on the agenda. And that is it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Berentine. Did you want to follow up on what? Councilmember Wink, your light is on. Did you mean for?
No report.
Okay. Councilmember Martinez.
Yeah, just want to remind folks that we have the final household hazardous waste event this coming Saturday, 8 to 2 at the Service Center. So if you have stuff to get rid of, come get rid of it. Yes, it's at the Service Center. It's 2800 South Platte River Drive, I believe.
Yep.
It's near there.
You'll see signs, right? If you drive down there, I think they put up a
Yes.
sign. Yeah.
It's really.
Anything further?
No, that's it.
Thank you. Council.
Yeah, we could use some signage. Yeah.
Right. Councilmember Berentine.
I want to make sure that any of the reports that are coming from citizens to us, that we're not encouraging ever any censorship. So we're going to see them if it comes forward. The other clarification, so I don't object to maybe what he's asking for, but there's no way to censor what's coming into council. They send their stuff. So, but there were policy questions that I was very disturbed with that were kind of embedded in the in-between lines, and I think I'd prefer to go, since we happen to be meeting tomorrow, I would prefer to go over that with you privately. So I've changed my mind. I would not want to make a public comment about what my concerns are right now.
Is that your council? You're done with your council members' choice time? Okay, great. Mayor Pro Tem, and then Mayor Cuesta.
The only thing I have is Councilmember Sierra reminded me to the alternative language. I would like to see some alternative language suggested to enable the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee to engage those areas of the code that the code enforcement addresses. Thank you.
Member Cuesta.
Thank you, Mayor. And my question may be for you, City Manager Lewis, and it's regarding the portal. You sent out, I guess I'd call it a prototype almost of the portal, and I'm trying to understand exactly what that would be used for. It looked like at a minimum it would be a repository to where council members could place documents into this central portal, and then other council members could see it. Is that open to the public as well?
Mayor, Councilmember Cuesta, the portal as currently developed is not open to the public. So we did get contacted the company that we were trying to use to do that, and they responded today that there is not a way to do that. So what we think, well, we may be going back to the drawing board on the tool that we showed you and just make it more web-based. The problem is it's really, it's kind of tricky to do that from a webmaster kind of standpoint, but we're going to be looking at that. The other alternative is just put a kind of a duplicate copy of what's on the portal, that it's kind of copied onto, you know, a page onto the city website. But it's just, yeah, where you would actually upload would be on the portal. I don't know if does that make sense?
It does. So the intention, though, although it's not there yet, is to have that accessible by public as well, or that the public can see whatever documents are placed into there. That was the first component of it, is more just council members are placing documents there. Secondarily, is that supposed to serve as a communication tool Is there place for a council member to comment on a particular documents as well?
That's a good question. I don't know. And actually, Mayor Olson, this is all kind of a result of you guys talking about this in Mayor Olson. So we can actually make it whatever you want. You can see we've added a lot of kind of links and additional information that you didn't ask for, but we think you might could use. So
You
we
bet.
can have a comment form too.
My thought was that that was one of the built-in features of it. I was apprehensive about that feature. I mean, it seems to me it's not only that people are looking for documents to be placed somewhere, but also a further conversation on documents. In you know, kind of a centralized place like that, I wasn't sure if that was going to be a built-in feature. If it's not, and maybe we can say it was placed in there last week, everybody reference it, we'll talk about it at the next meeting. It seemed like the portal was starting to become live or getting close to live, and so I just wasn't sure exactly what the parameters of the portal were, and really what the goal of it is, what the function was, public visibility, et cetera. And maybe that's a conversation for a different time when we get closer to having it ready for release. But you sending the email on it, and I can't find the email now, but it seemed like it was in the past week. It just kind of piqued my curiosity on it.
Last Friday, I think. Yeah, and I would be a little hesitant to have kind of a council forum. I think that would violate probably open meetings. But, I mean, where you could comment necessarily back and forth. But what I do think it could be is a portal also not only for just emails that you receive that you want to share, but also the council requests could potentially go through there. You could always still send them to Krista or myself, and we could, you know, have those loaded. But so that you have kind of a live place as they come in of what's come in before we send them out on Thursday afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to build off of that. I intended it to be a place to send council requests, an easier way than to send it out to 3 or 4 of us, or, you know, in violating some of the comments that have gone on, and make sure that it's out there. But I do think it requires us to say, I want this to be a council request. It can't be sort of, you know, veiled in it, which I think has happened as well, and then staff didn't know it was meant to be a council request. So I would not be in favor of a forum of any form. I think it would be antithetical to why we're doing it. So that would not be my choice, but I suppose we can meet with the city attorney to ask what is the best way to use it. I have a few things. First of all, I wanted to thank our city manager for this great Friday update email that you give us every week. It's really nice. We were chatting a little bit with you earlier, but I just really appreciate the updates and the kind of information you're getting from your different directors to keep us informed. Very helpful. Saturday really was an amazing event for Be a Tool. Again, thanks to Tony and the folks from the neighborhood rehab, and it really was a fun day. And you did the house, didn't you? You painted the house? No, you did the other big project. Half the house. So there was a house that 2 women needed to be painted because they're going to lose their insurance, and it needs to be painted by the end of this month. And the Craig Hospital folks had 27, 30 people come as a team, and they got a lot. I think they finished the house, didn't they? The entire house. It's a big house. So we may have helped 2 sisters stay in their house. It's amazing. So very fun day, and lots of interaction with great neighbors and folks that care about the city. And then the last thing is we have a trash talk this week, right? Another one on Thursday night, is that right? And it's next week. I think I have it on the wrong date on my calendar. So heads up, 2 weeks, September 26th. And is that time still the same? Is it a 5 to 7 open house style, right? Yeah, okay, great.
Are the people that signed up being notified? How are they doing that? Because I just had a complaint that people didn't think they were getting communicated enough with. How are we reaching out for that?
All right, well, we'll get more information on that and make sure that everybody's, remember, Krista, did you have her light on for more? Oh, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure she put hers on, and I thought you might have too. And I thought, okay, well, we'll go back to discussion. All right, council or city manager.
No report.
City attorney.
No report.
Yeah, this meeting is adjourned.